combined board with the county and the city. 75% of everything was pretty much related to KTI,
Is that
all the
right?
local people. And then once they got to the outlying regions, it was still 25% of the conversation was still about KTI and the stuff. And,
Hopefully positive.
oh yeah, it was, because they talked about this. They talked about the broadband effort that's going pretty dang good in the greater county. And
You need some power.
No, that's right.
I did think it was funny on Facebook. We had a comment that on the Koochiching Technology Initiative, when we were asking for help, letters of support for the grants that Paul Bunyan applied for, somebody said, well, how many jobs is this going to create, because Paul Bunyan doesn't have any technicians up here. And thought two things: Frontier needs to have the technicians because their stuff is garbage, and then the second one is that's not the type of economic development that this stuff spurs. You know, it's people working at home now and things like that. So it would be, you know, just the ones that we're going to be able to quantify necessarily, especially right away. But the statistics are out there. I mean, you know that more than anybody. So.
Well, every time somebody moves into a house in rural Koochiching County,
Right.
you know, to some extent you can say broadband has been
Yeah.
they say, oh, I can live there because I have.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I would never move out of the city or the Midco areas for that same reason, because that's all I use the internet now.
Well, the kind of letters of support that Paul Bunyan's most interested in getting is letters about how, you know, I can't make ends meet. I try to do this long distance job, but it barely works, and I don't want to move out of my house, and I have to drive my kids into town so they can do homework on the internet, and you know, that's the kind of letters that they want, and that's the answer to the proper answer to that question.
Well, we've had so many professional people move, and then their spouse wants to have something to be able to do, and,
Yeah, that's it.
and internet is so bad.
In fact, I did a
Speaking of
poll.
internet, Penny, what's the password here?
It's our phone number, let's see, I think it's just 283-3454. I don't think we have to put.
And speaking of Paul
Put it
Bunyan,
in like
283.
3454.
So the Paul Bunyan proposal that they're putting in, what can you say about that? What do you know about it? This is applying for the state.
Yeah, they're getting for Cap Togama, because we included that area in the KTI area, and since it's out of the county, they applied for some IRRB money. So they needed some emergency letters of support, I guess, for that. I don't know how that one went, and or if they decided yet. They might be like any day now. And so now we have until September 9th for letters of support for September. What month are we? Yeah, September 9th.
Yeah.
So,
I saw the
2 weeks.
I saw the city gave a letter of support.
Yeah, the city did. We've got one coming from the county. I was writing ours from Small Town Tech the other day, or yesterday, and I had the hospital writing one for a letter of support for rural health and in regards to that. So we have Sage Johnson that is contracting for us to do a lot of that support and reach out to everybody, and I think we'll have all the letters of support that we could get. You know,
And so those areas identified at the broadband conference, one or more of those going to be?
4 of the 5 areas we identified are what Paul Bunyan is going for. They're not doing Rainy Lake East.
I think that's because of the uncertainty of bedrock and, you know, the cable and the lines out there, but it's more because this was all such a short timeline that they hopped in on with the grants. I'm sure in the next round of funding, once they see the take rate of this, which I think will be significantly higher, especially with the KTI group championing the area. I know one problem that they had was they came to Big Falls and that take rate wasn't what they expected. And I said, well, you didn't have everybody being a cheerleader, you know, like you have in International Falls, and I think that was a big part of it. It's the KTI. Well, it wouldn't have happened had, you know, we not started this group and you guys not had supported it. So it was entirely because of this. I mean, of course, they have to do their part too. But yeah, it's just awesome. Paul Meminen, who's the director of KETA, he said that this is his favorite board, even though we're not a board group to be on, because we're getting stuff done, you know. And he does a lot of meetings to meet, and he gets a little tired of it. And so when he comes to this, we're talking about, okay, next week we're doing this, and next month we'll have this done, and stuff like that. And we might not always meet our deadlines, but we get pretty darn close.
That's exciting. Well, that's really exciting, you know, that little exercise at the conference turned into the relationship with Paul Bunyan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And because I know, you know, Nevin had probably called Paul Bunyan 30 times previously to say, oh, you should come expand here in Marshall Falls. Oh, yeah, you know. But the exercise we did and the follow through that you guys have done.
Well,
exciting.
and it's 12 months later. It's so fast.
Yeah, that's what we thought. We were very happy. We did it. We had a couple drinks that night, I think, when we got the email saying we're applying for these grants. So we're pretty excited about it.
And then when we went down and toured the launch pad, I can't remember the gentleman's name.
Steve Howard.
Yeah.
Yep.
He was there.
Oh, good.
So we had a little private meeting with him and begged him to come and service our new operations. So.
Good.
Yeah, the internet you're on
They
right
love
now
to
is
see
Volunteer, but it's
Yeah.
going to be Paul Bunyan.
Yeah, the line is.
Edit
in.
that out, Ed.
We're waiting for these two guys now to finish it up.
Good luck.
Yeah.
They're too busy doing this community stuff.
So with the broadband stuff, we're going to share all the data from those surveys with other service providers. We're going to try to talk Midco into going east because they already plan to go a little bit east. But we'll give them, after we show them the take rate results from the surveys, we'll let them see whether they want to prioritize that. And then once that's done, we're going to switch to exploring fixed wireless in the areas that aren't going to be hit soon by a major ISP. And Granite Digital, sitting over there, is already very up to speed on fixed wireless, and already has worked on a proposal for the Rainy Lake East area, and the same basic concept applies to some other areas that won't get covered by Paul Bunyan. So let's see what can come from that.
And who would cover that?
So I'll back up one step. The reason that we're contemplating doing wireless service on the lake is the inherent difficulty with running new fiber out there.
Yeah.
There's existing fiber, but that's controlled by Frontier. And if you know the current story with Frontier, they're in no position to do any CapEx. What we learned from the exercise that led up to Paul Bunyan getting the grant is about $6,500 a home to bring fiber to the premises. So with or without a grant, that's the average cost. It's going to be much higher out there because of the difficulty with the bedrock. So a fixed wireless system that would reside on the new AT&T tower houseboats, for example, would give us significant range, light up the bulk of the area that doesn't have true broadband right now. And we're not kidding ourselves. Sooner or later, either 5G or some fiber project in conduit so that we can run more fiber through it, unlike what they did under that last round of grants for Frontier, is going to happen, but probably not in the next 5-ish years. So this would be a stopgap that would get some true broadband out to the folks via wireless until some other infrastructure comes in. And we'll see how it goes on Rainy. It makes sense there because it's a pretty dense population, and affluent households that afford it. The objective was to take the profits from that project and try another one out in a rural area where nobody's ever going to go, and see if that would make sense financially.
Our cell phone data and voice coverage network, which is pretty weak in the county, mostly because of the not in my backyard
She's a county IT
phenomenon.
person.
She's the county IT person, and she's part of our team as well. Probably offered yet another meeting. She's a very busy lady, and she is going to champion that effort in part through KTI, leverage us and the county and such to find some places to actually put towers that make sense network-wise, and that will be how we cover almost everybody else who fixed wireless and cable to the home can't meet. There'll be always a few, one shack way out there in the middle of nowhere that's going to be satellite or nothing, but that's our kind of our long-term plan we're working towards, and we're really happy for the kickstart we got through you guys to get on with exploring that.
Paul Bunyan, they did base the areas that they were going off of that charrette that we had. But they, since then, have expanded it. I don't know how many more households that it now covers, but it does cover quite a bit more area, and it's more refined so that they're not going to as much vacation property and stuff like that, or agriculture. So even than what we planned on, we're even getting more than that, and some of that had to do with the support of Rob Eklund, Tom Bach, Kitchen, Paul Bunyan on going to those areas too. Even a couple areas that's pretty. I didn't even know we're in Koochiching County or District 3. To be honest with you, I've never heard of a couple of them because there was 3. He sent us, get us letters of support for this, and I hadn't heard of 3 of them. So they were
Little
probably
locations, little clusters of houses.
Yeah.
North Star Electric Cooperative joining us in on this effort to get that survey
so
out has been huge. They just stepped up and volunteered to, at their cost, mail these surveys to everyone.
Nice.
And collect them and get them back to us.
What
And
kind of a return rate have
that's
you
been
got?
huge.
That's a good question. I know that I can't remember what Sage said. They were higher than when we started, which was next to nothing. And I want to say the highest was 20-25% of survey.
I think it was 35 in one area.
In Ray or Ericsburg.
Yeah.
And then it went all the way down to Captogama was like at 13%. So they were a little bit harder to reach. And when we initially started, they were a little bit harder to get all those surveys in too. But that was Mike Hansen had heard about the KTI thing, and we worked with him on a couple different things. And Soren Olson.
He's over in Birchdale.
Yeah, between Soren Olson and Mike Hansen, they're doing everything in that area.
Yep.
And so he caught wind of the surveys, and he was the one who orchestrated getting the surveys in that mailer, and that was so awesome. Just to
Nice.
get that support.
Well, his daughter's general manager over there.
Is it
Yeah.
Anna?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
We were hoping for about a 50% reply rate on the surveys. I was
Oh,
anyway.
that's unheard of.
Well, that's what.
But as at our last meeting, the last KTI meeting, is like what the metric that counts to me is how does Steve Howard feel about the response rate, and he's happy with it. So that's what I mean.
Yeah, because we couldn't get a number out of it, and it was like pulling teeth. And so finally we said, well, what if we got a 50% response rate? And we go, oh my God, that'd be great. So now we at least had a ceiling to go for, and figured if that's great, half of that might be good.
Yeah.
He's mentioned a few communities where 35% of the potential takers wrote a actual letter of support, never mind a survey. Like, well, boy, I don't know if we'll get that or not, but so we're pushing ourselves pretty hard, and it's very nice to be able to use some of the BBC money to pay Sage Johnson to put in some serious time, because as much as I want to throw half my life at some of this stuff, I just can't.
So did Sage go door to door then, or what
She
did
didn't. She was
Actually,
mostly
she
doing
did in the Rainy Lake area.
a little bit, yeah,
A little
in
bit.
her neighborhood. She's in the one area that Paul Bunyan did not decide to apply high speed to, and she knew that was probably the least likely for area that they would go after. But she'll lean on Midco, no doubt
She
as
was
well.
orchestrating other volunteers for their area and getting some leads for each different area. And since she's got on even our social media and public awareness of what KTI is doing, it's gone up significantly too.
So Midco now is doing fixed wireless.
They are, yep. The Red River Valley test went through its first phase of testing.
Yeah.
And now looking at rolling that out in other areas, and that may be what happens with them. It might be Midco fixed wireless.
Right.
They're advertising a lot for their fiber optic 200 speed.
Mm-hmm.
They got a bunch of federal money down in southwestern Minnesota that along their fiber routes,
Right.
they're putting fixed wireless out in the more rural places.
When we talked to them about it for this area, because they know about the tree density and everything like that, and it's less plainy than down there. I don't know if plainy is a word. So they said, well, we're going to test it out here, see how it works, and then start moving it to some of the more challenging areas.
Yeah, you guys would definitely be a challenging spot.
Yes. Other stuff we could talk about. We're happy to talk about broadband for an hour or two, but the biggest frustration we've had has been the community marketing, video marketing effort. But we've reached a final decision, and we told them no about that. And
We did.
We don't know yet. You would know best what, if any, blowback or reaction there's been from that. But we also have our own thoughts on. We have our own thoughts about marketing the community. That is definitely outside of KTI's purview, and some things that are like the Eliite and Incredible Ely efforts, which we're very inspired to do something along those lines. And Richard Stewart's open to partnering with us.
Yesterday on that, Sage Johnson and I met, and because of our last KPI meeting that we had, I didn't know, one of the problems we've had is Jim and I are too busy to champion something like that, like Richard Stewart has with Eliites. And
Right.
so we asked Sage if that's something that she would be interested in, because Richard Stewart is designing his, so it's somewhat white labeled and anybody can hop it on it and use it afterwards. I checked it out live yesterday and it had quite a bit of information. I would do a few things a little different, but overall it was pretty nice. And so now we're going to work with Richard Stewart and get a proposal ready for KTI to try to fund something, a web portal for our area, and then create a brand along with any of the stakeholders that would like to be involved that includes that. And we haven't figured out what that brand is yet, because I haven't thought of any good ideas, and Sage was going to brainstorm some and we'll have to get some public input on it, but it'll be something for the whole area, and it'll
Not icebox.
so many people are sick of that, you know.
Well, and another thing I've been thinking about is possibly breaking it down into sub-regions, so we wouldn't have one for the entire place.
That's possible.
Talking with the marketing people, you know, the Rainy Lake area has a natural draw to come out and use the lake and use the park. Birchdale and, you know, most of the county, spatially certainly the vast majority of the county, and population-wise, a quarter of the county. It's not about that. If you're going there to canoe or hunt or whatever, and so marketing. And there's been competition over, you know, or discussions over how to allocate marketing dollars from various sources. So separating them makes a fair amount of sense. But this is not the same kind of thing exactly. But you know, the Eliite thing, it's just Ely, city limits. It's a different phenomenon. So you know, we could work on with one for Cabotogama, one for Big Falls and North Home of an Eliite type thing.
Maybe
So.
one major landing page to link to all of them too, possibly.
Yeah.
But, so that's what we're going to come up with the proposal. We started on it yesterday at the very early phases, and hope to get one here in a couple weeks of what that'll be and how that'll work. And so
That is a challenge for a big thing, you know, for your big geography. And it's funny, no one uses Koochiching at all, right? I mean, as a brand,
A little bit.
you know, very low, you know, so,
But, yeah.
because it's all cab, it's all Rainy Lake, you know, Rainy River, and Rainy is a terrible, you know, like Rainy, it was.
There's that. There's Icebox of the Nation. A lot of people want to get rid of that entirely. I'm like, no, add to it. Don't
Yeah.
get rid of it. But yeah, there are
That icebox
some
of the nation
connotations.
thing, is that a formal or is that an informal?
It's
I
informal,
think we have
but
a trademark.
there was a lawsuit over it. Yeah,
But that's 50 years old or more, right?
it's not like the National Weather Service decided we were the Icebox of the Nation. There was a community in Colorado.
We
Yeah.
fought some legal battles for
Yeah.
the trademark.
They have a legit claim, and they've also used it. But
Was it associated with the county though, or the town?
City.
The
City, I
city?
think.
the city was the one who sued it. Yeah.
It's funny that the co-working space program that comes up on September 13th and 14th, the second day is all on branding. No, really specifically of co-working spaces, but it might be, might lead to more. I don't know.
So
iFalls and iTech is, you know, I mean, if you think of iFalls.
The iFalls,
is the
I
same
suppose.
thing, like the iPhone.
interesting.
Yeah.
So,
I hadn't heard anybody throw that
That's
out before.
$1,000 you owe me right there.
We appreciate your in-kind contribution.
The ice skates.
so it was a voyage forward, right, was the name of the big effort that this
Yep.
video thing
It was one
spun
of
out of.
marketing was one of like 9 priority areas that they identified.
So is that, I'm just curious, is that whole effort's got any legs still, or what?
This was the last legs.
There was,
I hate to say
Chopped
that
them
we're
off.
the ones who chopped them off, but it really was. They had They didn't have a lot of legs. It was a lot of meeting to meet type of thing. And one thing that did come out of that, the gym was part of the effort for, was easier access to cross the borders on boats. So now they have iPad stations at Shay Shay and houseboats or Thunderbird.
Thunderbird houseboats.
Yeah. So
They
they
have
have,
them,
Yeah.
so they have a couple places now you can cross on your boat and check in with customs. And that was one thing that came out of it. And then they were holding on to some of the marketing stuff. And the problem that we had with the marketing thing was it was so specific and didn't come with a distribution plan. So their distribution plan was, well, we'll put it on everything, you know, and the marketers in the room would know that that's not a plan. That's just something you say. And so we asked for some demographics and targeted marketing online and how that was going to go and things like that. But PETA's relaunching, and they're going to apply for the tech side of it, Your Ticket Home program that they used to have, and that they haven't written a grant request from KTI yet, but it'll be coming here any day now. And in that marketing that they're going to be doing, they're going to be doing a very short amateurish videos of come back, or this is why we're back, you know, stuff like that.
Sure.
And when I put out on Facebook, I have a pretty good following on there. I put on if you're not originally from the area, why are you here? Why did you come back, and why are you still here? And I would say 95% of everybody who wrote something, it was because my spouse got a job here and we loved it, you know. And so the idea was that we need to stop pushing for some multi-millionaire to come here and start cultivating the people who are moving here and making them want to stay here.
I've noticed that I just had my 50-year class meeting, and there's more and more of my classmates that have retired, and now they're buying summer places, or they're moving back because the housing was way cheaper than the city, you know?
Mhm.
Yeah. But
So-
the other thing that came out of Wage Forward was a housing collaborative.
Oh yeah, that's still happening.
That was big, and that's still going strong.
Well, that's
Yeah.
good to hear. Did you feel like you were able to explain to your marketing folks what your concerns were? And, I mean, how was that?
In a meeting that didn't go too well, yeah.
Yeah.
We felt we did a good job explaining, we're not sure if they did a good job understanding.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that was really the big riff, that
Sure.
there's a lot of heart in it, but there's not a lot of professionalism in it, and there's not a lot of flexibility.
And they put a lot of effort into their side, and it's been ongoing for a while now. And so I think that's where some of the contempt came from. But it was actually pretty funny because we're at this meeting, and the mayor of Big Falls said, well, she was angry when she was saying it. This seems like a very High Falls driven thing. And,
KTI.
KTI was, and like literally one of our projects was from High Falls. The rest were trying to support the outer areas, including funding for co-working space where Soren lives out in the Birchdale area. And so it was just kind of funny, the misconception of just because we were all High Falls people that were sitting there. So we made it clear, like, actually, all the broadband and everything that we're fighting for, none of us live in that area except for one of the people that's on the committee, and that'd be Alyssa. And so we tried to stop some of those misconceptions, but I don't know that we did because of that.
And thanks for joining, right?
Yeah.
You know, and
And that's what we said.
invitation to join. Yeah.
And that's what also we said is, like, literally, we'll take anybody if you want to come and help. We don't care, you know. We don't care what area you're from. You can be from out of
Right.
Koochiching County.
It's too bad for the people that are in those areas aren't participating.
And Soren participates pretty actively. He's advocating for his area, but he works at a school, and you know, so he stays involved and everything, but he can't come to the meetings.
Sure.
So Sonia Pellin, the Little Fork city administrator, really, was part of our cohort of
Yes.
land and community leadership graduates, and she really wanted to be part of KTI, but with some serious family health issues she was dealing with, she needed to not do that yet, but she may.
She's staying up to date.
She's staying up to date. She's on our distribution list, and she may very well participate. So we definitely cultivate those relationships in the outlying area. And with this whole idea of the Eliites 2.0 type thing, I'm thinking strategically we might want to emphasize the outlying areas first. If we break it down to subregions and stuff, just to help with that impression, we can help build the goodwill. But the broadband expansion is going to do a lot of that.
Absolutely.
As well. And so far that's cost the least, other than the money we've started spending for Sage's effort. And that might be one of the things that'd be most useful to talk with you guys about, with comparison of us with other broadband communities. The amount of volunteer time we have, is a huge constraint. I would throw a lot more time at it happily if I had the time. And Sage has volunteered some of her time as well, but we were asking her to work half time or a little bit. I think she ended up working quite a bit more than half time, but as volunteer for the rest. But the degree to which it's possible to get more or less a paid employee or serious, I don't know, you can't really do it as a volunteer, I would think, to be that time intensive, but the value of having somebody who we can say, hey, we need to do a Facebook campaign for getting letters of support, etc., make it happen. We could tell her that, and she could do it.
And as an independent contractor.
As an independent contractor is how that is structured. As we were having this meeting here this morning, I was thinking, boy, is that something where we could ask the county potentially to fund something like that, or to designate some time from one of their employees to do something like that, or whether there's some other funding source we can tap into. And I'm just curious what experience you guys have with other communities solving that available work time question to pursue this.
Well, we sure see that you're absolutely right, that the ability to have talent available to do the work is a huge factor.
Mm-hmm.
And we have had communities in the past recognize the need for a specific task and chunk that out as a job or
Right.
a piece of work that could then be reimbursed.
Well, oftentimes a project needs staffing, and that staffing is either match or is paid for out of the grant.
Mm-hmm.
Most people don't hire somebody to do, or there might be a contractor. Most people don't bring on another person and pay their salary as part of a project, but.
But like Richard and
Yeah.
Ely, he gets plenty of money out of the Ely, the broadband money out of Landon as project manager for this or that, Ely.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I think if it's tied to a project there's 20 hours for this project or 100 hours for that project, and it's at X dollars per hour,
Mm-hmm.
you can use those grant funds, and then if there's other match, that's the volunteer time is the match that, of either that staff person or, people on your team,
Mm-hmm.
then that's a reasonable project.
Okay.
Right, Mary?
Yes.
Well, and the one
Cool.
thing to keep in mind is that is the sustainability of it, right? So, because the funding source for that salary, whatever, that is gonna go away.
Right.
And so you wanna understand that as you're building out your team and your plan, that
Mm-hmm.
unless you could find, you mentioned the county, but, just be aware that that's kind of a one-off funding.
Through the BBC definitely is.
Yeah, and so you wanna just think about that as you plan forward, cause it's hard to get money for a salary, it is.
We have had incredible support from the city of Idaho and the county, but that hasn't translated. It's more cheerleading than I have no clue if you go in there and ask this money what their response will be. Especially our county is historically just cheap. Not in a bad way. I guess they're looking for their taxpayers, but they don't fund a lot of stuff. And so even though every one of them thinks that we're walking on water right now, I don't know if that would translate into funding from the county.
But at least we're well positioned to start asking about it.
And if you said, well, here's a $30,000 project, and we're gonna get 10 from Landon, and we're gonna, with 10 from the county, and we're gonna have 10,000 of volunteer time to do it.
Right.
That'd be a nice way to edge into that, that there's, then if you perform, of course, and you're going back again, it's a little easier than, we met 12 times as an outcome.
Yeah.
So.
We absolutely believe in leveraging the money. And the whole notion of paying anybody to do I really want it to be all volunteer stuff, but it was just seeing that great opportunity of the broadband expansion just slipping away because we weren't going to be able to get out there and knock on the doors and call people up and make it happen unless we could. So we called you guys kind of in desperation, can we do this? Can we do anything like this? So, sounds like, yes, it's definitely something we could continue to explore, especially for the BBC type funding. It should be a discrete project, like it's gonna be this thing with this end goal as opposed to an ongoing thing.
Well, what I
and-
mean by that is this, again, it's just having the long term in mind.
Right.
You don't wanna rely,
Right.
get stuck relying on somebody and then you don't have a way to.
That was one of our concerns with the video project is we know that video marketing, you don't do it just once. It has to be part of a long-term, ongoing, refreshed thing. And we didn't see much prospect for that, so.
We also believe a lot in momentum.
Yep.
That if you get a lot of things going, you spend that money and you pay your staff to do it, and it gets done, and there's success, and that attracts additional funding, resources.
Right.
And so, to use that money, that's why, we try and jump in early, let's get some projects going, right?
Right.
So there's some successes, and so if we can build that momentum, you can kind of say, well, we'll deal with sustainability later, and some of that is
some degree,
valid in a program like what we're doing, let's get something going, see some success, and hope that it continues, and frankly, in some places it does, in some places it kind of fades away, but
Right.
we still look back and say, well, look at all the good stuff that happened, a lot of that is permanent, whether it's equipment in a classroom, or new curriculum, or,
Well, with a co-working here and in Birchdale, and if the actual broadband expansion actually happens, we are definitely going to leverage that momentum and credibility for pursuing other related projects on the broad theme of KTI and BBC type projects.
So, what else is going on then with what other projects do you have that have been funded?
That have been funded.
The one that's up and running right now is the Smoky Bear Wi-Fi project at the Smoky Bear Park down there. And we got that, our goal was to get that up and running, because Small Town Tech was doing the installation of that, was to get it up and running by the Bass Tournament, because that's the biggest event I think we have in this town. So it was a great way to stress test it and see how it worked, and it didn't break.
Turned out we matched quite a bit more than we anticipated too, because we were about 12 hours over our estimate of how much time it would take to mount that stuff up way
We
up
got an
high like
insane
that.
picture of Jim on the ladder over the bench.
30 foot, 30 foot ladder.
But-
Public Wi-Fi is,
But-
people are like, oh, it's, in some cases, okay, the library points its router outside the window, right? But that's.
Yeah, and that's what they were doing, and it actually has good user coverage, but, my wife cleans there, and she said, people are still hanging out on the steps. I said, well, let's leave them a note saying you go over to Smoky Bear now.
Picnic
So-
table over there.
And it
So
had
that's
good
a success.
coverage when we tested it too.
Yeah.
Is the library the feed for that?
It is, yeah. The Midco, their Midco contract is the feed for
I
that.
think they have an MESC line and a Midco line. Midco line is, they upped their speeds, with that was part of their in-kind match that they were doing. They did also, do the, KTI grant. It was a 3-part grant, and one was for, lynda.com, which is now LinkedIn Learning,
Right.
for an annual or, twice annual subscription of that. And that's going live, and people are starting to use that. We don't have, numbers on it, because my last library board meeting that I had just started. But that's something that we
Remind us what that is again?
Lynda.com?
Yeah,
LinkedIn
it
Learning?
basically, it's an online training platform that teaches you everything from technology to business management, and with it you can literally learn anything. And it's kind of like Khan Academy, except less academic and more practical. And then there's that, and then there was
How are they marketing that then?
the normal way that they're marketing everything right now, which I think at the next library board meeting we're taking a look at their overall marketing, because they have, besides this, they have amazing things that go to the performances and everything, and people just don't show up. So we're revamping our marketing strategy going forward as a member of the library board, and hoping to get a bigger take rate on not only this, but they also have things like Hoopla, which is online ebooks and audiobooks and even video rentals that now anybody in the county can access. And even the take rate on that isn't what you would think it would be for how amazing, how much money it saves you too. Just the audiobook is $100 if you buy one, and they have just about So that's something the library has to take on just general marketing for anything that they do. And
This
then
would be a great space for some of that learning, you know, that
Yeah, Patty's talked about that.
in a more adult setting, right? You know, so you could have wine and a topic, right, up here. You know, as long as the wine, I'm sure it's free.
Yeah, there's,
You know, or whatever. But you know, that would be a fun kind of gathering
Yeah.
thing.
yeah, we'll see how big a success the entrepreneurial meetups that BBC is funding here, and what that can breed into, you know, spin off into workshops and training and stuff would be great. That was part of what you had in mind.
Well, in this library content that you're talking about, Ted, I haven't seen elsewhere. Be really interested to see what kind of interest or, you know, because it was something that we could maybe share with
The
others.
Linda stuff?
Happy to. Yeah.
Yeah, that's been around for a minute, and I can't remember what
I
it's
mean,
been renamed to, but that's.
in our communities, I'm not aware that anybody's.
Yeah, LinkedIn recently bought it.
It's a-
so
Oh, it's a great, they have a lot of great classes at that.
It's a great way to help meet that knowledge part of the intelligent community factors. It's certainly an area, we're not alone, but it's knowledge workforce is definitely something we have to work on a lot up here.
I don't think it's well known that that's available.
No, it's not, and it's just as available. It hasn't even been. It's probably been a couple of weeks.
And sometimes libraries are busier during the school year. And it's, you know, just kind of inherent in them.
And what was the third thing
Well,
with the library?
I can't remember because the meetup thing was a separate one that they did.
Isn't
and
there a
they did that.
remote co-working space?
So, yeah, that's out in Birchdale, and I don't know the progress on that. But the other thing that the library was doing, they created a recording studio.
Oh, yes.
For podcasts or musicians and stuff like that. So they have now a soundproof room. Now, a lot of that money didn't have anything to do with KTI or Platinum. Library was left $60,000 from somebody from Little Fork to do as a library if it saw fit. So that was a lot of that was funded through this.
Most of it.
A little bit of the grant and for the hardware and programs maybe came from KTI, and I think that might have been the part that they contributed or that we contributed, and you guys contributed, and that just opened up about 3 or 4 days ago. And they have their first podcast that was recorded in there, and
That's
yeah, and it's a nice soundproof room that's right upstairs, and the location was a little scary because it was soundproof and it'd be a library, but it seems that worked out. And so that's just a general project that this kind of helped with. I would have, to be honest with you, that one might have happened anyways, but now we have, the library is also now digitizing with some OCR technology, all the old newspapers that they have that are deteriorating
awesome.
and about to disintegrate, basically. So once they're being scanned, that's probably the last time they'll be touched too, and then people will be able to search all the old articles and from 100 years back. So, and a lot of those are the only copy that they have, and that's what the other part of that $60,000 is going to be spent.
Cool.
So that's not planned.
That's not planned.
so more Blandon money. Literally on my way here, I bumped into the director of Servants of Shelter, and we funded them to put in Wi-Fi for their temporary. They have 5 apartments in a building for temporary housing for people, and some Blandon money was used for putting in good Wi-Fi throughout the entire building because they had bad Wi-Fi in part of the building prior to that, and that's really important because they need to be able to be on the internet and reachable to apply for jobs and funding sources and permanent housing and things like that. So that got funded and the check's ready, and as soon as she says go, we will go.
And the other one is KCCTV was approved, and that was for some equipment so that they could do. CNN calls them like iReports. I don't know what their thing would be, but they rent out the camera and equipment, or not rent out, loan out the camera and equipment after somebody takes their orientation class on what not to grade, I guess. And there's some plans on using that in conjunction with the school for like Ruby's Pantry is something that Bacchus puts on there for distributing excess food. And the KCCTV is working with the cooking, I want to say home ec, I don't think it's called that anymore. Facts, I think is what it
Facts.
stands for, or is what it is.
Family and consumer science.
Yeah, there you go.
Say
And
it
so,
again. Say it again.
Family and consumer science.
okay, so, and the teacher from that is an amazing teacher, one of the best that we have, and she's going to be working with her kids to produce videos with this equipment
Nice.
to show what they can cook with the Ruby's Pantry stuff. Because sometimes,
Oh, nice.
to be honest with you get a jar of pickles, you know, and it's like, no, what do I do with my jar of pickles?
I have 5 gallons of eggs.
Yeah.
Now what do I do? I got a box of
Usually
40
Jim
pounds of
Collins
this.
says, you need a gallon of eggs.
Half a gallon of eggs.
So there's some of that that'll be going out, and then
That's awesome.
Their KCCTV now is going to come back and see. And I don't think this is. We'll have to figure out if this is a project that is worthy of funding based on the BBC requirements. But they're going to start live streaming games, or at least recording the football games and the hockey games, and. The radio station, I think, is also interested in working with them to do hockey games at least, but because they have an internet connection over there because of the proximity to the school. But the school is looking at, because I'm on that board, the school is looking at funding the football stadium over there for internet connection so that
That is
KCCTV
awesome.
can live stream the football games.
So, Bill, tell the story about Grand Marais.
Yeah, so Cook County Schools, we funded a project like that, like in 2009 or something. When they, so they started live streaming football games, and the kids, they were doing the play-by-play and stuff like that. And then they always wonder, you know, is anyone watching out there? And all of a sudden they get, their phone rings and it's somebody from Hawaii saying, "What's the matter? Your stream is down for the football game. What's going on?" You know, so it's somebody, Cook County resident who lives in 2 great places apparently, Hawaii and Cook County.
The
Wanted to watch the Grand.
Wanted to watch the Grand Marais football game.
there's a group of devoted watchers of the one of the sewer board meetings that KCCTV covers in North Dakota, and they have this drinking game going and the whole thing. And,
Oh my God.
yeah,
It's very contentious in this area.
Yeah,
because
yeah,
of the
what a-
things that are involved. It's the best meeting.
and that's all thanks to KCCTV coverage.
Well, that's
So
a
basically,
great way to encourage, you know, civility in public meetings is to start marketing.
Yeah.
Your meetings are so interesting. We're marketing these all over the country as
Right.
entertainment.
yeah, reality TV. This is the real thing. So
So
That's
to
great
your
about streaming,
question,
though.
we have funded that.
Oh, okay, that's good to
Yeah.
know because.
And really welcome that.
Yeah.
It's a great community building, and it shows, it demonstrates the benefits of high-speed internet.
yep.
Perfect.
And in the past, you know, people could watch the TV if they lived in town and had, you know, but all of these things are county board meetings and all these things that are, doesn't do any good for Koochiching County to broadcast those on the Midco cable system
Yeah.
when 90%
So
of the area is not.
KCCTV puts everything on YouTube, and
Yep.
I literally watch every meeting that they put on there, even the little tiny towns, just mostly because at some point they're gonna talk about technology and small town tech and make money, so I pay attention for those reasons
Yep.
and because of my community involvement.
So I was thinking about streaming, you know, we were at the brewery last night, because it's there, and so. And
Because
so,
beer.
you know,
Yeah.
but I mean, they're big on open stage and open mic and stuff, and they, you know, they organize something to have more kind of,
Yep.
be prepared to have a lineup or something on a Thursday night. That would be a cool thing.
The History on Tap thing they do there with the historical museum here.
Standing room only.
Standing room only. They had to split it into 2 separate sessions for the same thing, and they're bringing one of them back to have a repeat.
Oh, nice. So streaming
live.
that would be cool.
Yep,
you know?
and KCCTV does stream that kind of stuff. So it's actually one of the
It's not live, they put it on YouTube.
right, but it's a great funding thing. The BBC funding that went to KCTV, they already have this mandate to cover these community events, meetings, etc. But they were able to cover at best half of them, of what fits in their mandate, because they only have 1 paid person, and so the goal of that funding is to improve their hardware a bit and get students and community members coming in to borrow those cameras and go out and record these events and feed that video into their YouTube page, and then you got more people watching it, and with the expanded broadband, more people than ever before.
It's a virtuous circle for sure.
Yeah, exactly. So that was the logic of that funding, and that should be good. It included some kind of honorarium for the students that go out and collect video, a little bit of pocket money.
We did live stream. We just had that bass tournament that I was talking about here last weekend, and it's such an amazing thing that happens in this town. It was just a huge people that started it from the ground up. And this year, last year we kind of did it as a charitable donation. Small Town Tech live streamed their events, and then this year we got paid and then some sponsors and stuff there. And after the first day, it had 3,000 views the video. But people watching it live, the most it reached at a time was 250, but 900 people watched it live, and well, it was tuned back in and stuff like that. So,
Wow.
I was not
that
one
from
of
the
them.
park for the weigh-in, or was that from the lake?
Yeah.
that was from the park for the weigh-in, so that's what they were streaming. So, and day one had it was half of that, and then so I thought that was amazing. And then day two came around, and like everybody was chiming in on that one, so that was pretty cool. So there was probably, I don't even know, 1,000 or 2 people there. The tent was standing room only, again, shoulder to shoulder, but just all these other people. And I know a lot of them, because I can see which ones are my friends, you know, that are logging on. And there are people working in the mill that couldn't get off for it and stuff, so they're checking in.
Wow.
Did you check the accident rate at the mill?
Yeah.
They have really good safety there now.
It's slightly off
But
the
still.
topic, but Bill mentioned we were in Lanier last night.
Uh-huh.
Can you tell us about that hotel development? How did that investment
Local money and local persistence, and we're just going to get this done in passion. The inside scoop is, if it wasn't for that just absolutely we're going to make this happen. That some of the bureaucratic hurdles they needed to go through would have scared off most people. But it's a local family, 2 local families investing in that, and I don't know what they're doing for loans and other things or anything like that, but it's going to be really good for that community, that plus Loonies and some other things happening.
There's a huge dock that's going in there in conjunction
Yes.
with this that they're building. That has nothing to do with technology, but it goes to show that the city of Lanier is trying to do an overhaul of their image and what they're trying to be. And I think all the other towns around are now seeing this and thinking like, well, we need to get on board. We need to start being a little bit more modern than we are, because that hotel's going to be beautiful, I guess, depending on who you talk to. Some people in the smaller town might think it's an eyesore, but for the most part, it's going uncontended, and people are really excited about it. So I thought, and it's not going to be like a Holiday Inn, it's going to be a little bit more expensive, higher end. So it's a great litmus test to see, can our town support this?
It's actually gonna be a Wyndham property.
Yep.
Yep.
And all the way down that shoreline, there's amazing buildings. There's that old boathouse.
Yep.
Yep.
I mean, that's really cool.
And where that old boathouse is, if we're talking about the same place, I think that's where they're building that dock, I believe, too.
I think it's going to be right off the
like
county
a
dock.
public, just a public dock?
There is a ton of money available nationally for municipal community docks. Very little of that money has gone to Minnesota, and none of it to Koochiching County, and they have a good chance of tapping into it for this. And it's going to go, my understanding is it was going to go off the existing county dock at the end of that road that the boat launch is. They're going to send that out a long ways and then have a big T on the end, and you're going to be able to bring in multiple houseboats, utility hookups, and they've talked about sewer and they've talked about showers. We'll see if that happens or not. And they're going to move the boat launch from right next to that dock around to, it's only, I don't know, 1/8 of a mile away, but on the other side, on the river, so to the west. And then that current boat ramp would be a paddle-only boat launch and ramp for people to kayak and canoe into Loonies and
Get in while the getting's
the
good.
distillery.
They'll be a good
And
place.
yeah,
They have a phase 2 for the hotel.
Mhm.
So
Yep.
adding a restaurant and a gift shop, coffee shop.
It's kind of crazy that KTI kind of happened when it did, because there's a lot of reinvigoration going on in this area, including even down to Highway 53 is getting redone up until Northern Lumber there. And then, they're redoing some of the 11 and 71, and so to give our town a facelift at the exact same time. So like when I'm at Rotary, I'm telling people that like in 2021, this is gonna be a different town than what it is now. It's gonna be more vibrant. And I'm really starting to see the change in some of that. And some of that's maybe just because of my confirmation bias, because we're changing so much. But, a lot of people are excited about the future now.
So you won't be able to buy a house for $50,000 anymore?
Hope not.
And is that a future of more self-employed entrepreneurs?
Well, that's what I'm
Want
hoping
them to be
based
part of
on
it.
this, because like we just had Swanky Sweet Pea was they made like bath bombs and bath products and stuff like that. Well, they were just bought out by a national company in Texas, and that was literally started in her garage, you know, with hand doing everything. And then now she had a production facility out in Rainier that she purchased, and now it's getting bought up. So I keep on telling people our savior isn't the next Boise, it's the next small town tech, or it's the next Swanky Sweet Pea or something like that that's going to create these jobs and bring people here.
It's being bought out, but staying here.
Some of it's staying here. The production side of it is moving a little bit. I think they're splitting up the business a little bit, but
Okay.
and automating some of it. But
Well, roping then is to get with that entrepreneur and say, what's your next business?
yeah, and that's actually
We know
what
her.
she's looking at,
Yeah.
too.
She's got a big building there and she's
Yeah.
Nice. Well, you know, we care a lot about community college up here too, and
Mhm.
I know it's been a little bit of a struggle getting them engaged in the project.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about that? Do you see any
Very open to
opportunities
it.
for you need somebody there that wants in, right?
So Brad Crassway is our guy out at the college that is a good friend of mine, and he's also now, I started at Borderline Young Professionals, and now he's the chairman of it, and they're one of the people who supported and are part of the grant for the meetups here. And so the college per se isn't involved in it, but the college is represented by him, and there's a history between the college and the school and all that stuff, and some bad blood, and I think a lot of people are now over all that crap, you know, and ready to move forward, and all the old grudges that everybody has are really starting to go away of time, most of it. So, we did approach the college about KTI and about the type of projects we were funding and things like that, and they didn't submit anything. But we did try to pitch it to the new provost that's out there, who's been working with me in school stuff.
Well, good. I mean, you can only open the door,
Yeah.
right?
How much money do you guys have left to allocate?
A lot.
A good chunk, but I'm going to be running the numbers later this week.
Mary's got it.
There you go.
Okay.
And we have to apply for the other 12 or 13.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah, excuse
oh,
me.
I should just switch this to.
And so I need to do a little more bookkeeping for you.
But you only allocated like 22 and a half, so you still have like 52.
Okay.
So we need to really think about
Well,
spending that.
and a good chunk of that is going to go to the work Sage did on, it's not reflected in your numbers, but the work Sage did pushing the broadband expansion. So,
But that's not like a study, is it? It's
no, that was the mobilizing people to take the survey for the
Okay.
broadband expansion.
all right.
I'll get you a final number on that
Yeah.
soon. But yeah, there's still a significant amount left. And I was just yesterday emailed Richard Stewart to get some kind of information to help us budget for doing something like Eliite. You know, how much time to build the website, how much time to per listing of organizations and businesses. So we can use those numbers to help put together a proposal that has some basis in reality.
So you guys did apply for a feasibility study grant. right?
Correct. The infrastructure feasibility.
So
They
really
got
what's,
the shirt.
You know that's like a separate pot of money.
We do know that, yeah.
okay. I mean, that money that has been allocated to this gal, I mean, that's really feasibility study.
It could have been.
Yes.
Could it still be, or would it have had to been proposed
It would have
before
had
doing
to
it?
have been after the grant period started. So if
Okay.
you're gonna do any kind of that sort of work like after October 30th, it wouldn't be a bad idea to apply for some feasibility study money.
would be a bad idea.
Wouldn't
It
it
would
wouldn't
not
be
be,
a
it
bad
would be a good idea to apply for some feasibility study money.
So you wouldn't have to take that payment out
Out
of your
of
pot.
Yeah,
That's
but
So
separate pot.
let's explore that. Assuming that the money that we are going to Osage or do Osage can't fit, which makes sense. It's already been done. And the plan was originally to use the broadband money anyway, the big pool. It'd be good to explore with you guys legitimate things that we could do with that feasibility study. It is definitely our
Like
understanding.
the cellular business.
For example, it's definitely our understanding that it should be spent on a single thing, not multiple small feasibility studies, but one main thing. That's the vibe I've gotten from y'all, but I'm more than happy to be corrected. The things that make sense for us to explore are the cell phone expansion, the fixed wireless opportunities, real infrastructure issues that we still need to explore.
I think we wanted to deliver one grant,
it could
one
have
grant, so
Okay,
it could
so it
have
could be-
multiple things in there.
a grant.
Like fixed wireless and cell phone coverage, two separate projects, but applied for at the same time in the same application, with a appropriate budget breakdown.
I mean, one grant's always better than two as far as your reporting and that kind of thing.
Sure.
Just as long as you're using the same fiscal agent, I mean, it's not a problem to have two little projects instead of one big one.
Okay.
That's all.
Yeah. Well, you would know better than any of us about how much of that makes sense for fixed wireless exploration.
We've done some feasibility studies that have been pretty much, it's limited to engineering. So on a fiber to the home network or whatever down in Chisago County, relative, I think like $10,000 or something. With just essentially the county EDA hired an engineer to essentially do that preliminary engineering that then could be used for grant writing purposes and ultimately then for putting stuff in the ground.
Okay.
And we've labeled it pre-engineering, which is, it's phase one engineering, whatever you want to call it, but as we know, there's looking at it and making an estimate and then actually going out there with your little roller thing.
Well, I've certainly imagined the next thing with cell phone tower expansion is where are those best places to locate these towers that, rights to put the tower there could plausibly be acquired, and what would the coverage be, and how that compares to where the people are. And
Well, if the county was thinking about doing that anyways, right, then you kind of say, well, okay, we'll give you $10,000 for you to do that, and then you throw some money back for some of these community broadband projects. Maybe another way to kind of say, look at, let's partner on these several things.
Right. Help each other out.
Yeah.
Oh, that's something we definitely need to pursue with the physical broadband expansion. Steve Howard just asked us half a week ago or so to ask the city and county governments to see if they can pitch in some actual money.
Right.
Even just a little bit.
Yeah.
So
shows
that
they're
goes
doing
to scoring,
something.
that goes to scoring.
Yep, scoring of those grants.
And, I wanted to ask,
So,
if they get this grant, if Paul Bunyan gets this grant, what percentage of your problem is solved? I mean, how big of a chunk is this now?
When we initially did it, it was 50% of the underserved from the planning and charrette, but that included the lake property as well, 50% for the county. Because it didn't cover the Little Fork and Big Falls area. They have been in their city, but right outside of city limits, but they don't have anything again. So they, so that area is where a lot of the other 50% is, and that's about what we figured. Or 50% of the household.
That is a nice chunk.
Yeah, that's what we thought. And so I don't know with the lake being taken out of there, what that changes that to now.
Right.
Probably reduces it quite a bit.
Sure.
And then we tell people the lake's not taken out of there, it just takes more time.
Right. Lake is 630 addresses,
Okay.
so probably takes us down to 35% or so.
Okay.
Still pretty sure.
Still, and what was Paul Bunyan's calculation when they decided to not include that in their application?
I'm not sure.
didn't go into great detail.
They're worried about MediaCom, I'm sure, or Midco. Midco's halfway out there
Yeah.
already.
Challenging.
Well,
Yeah.
And they probably know stuff because they provide that backhaul for Midco that nobody's telling us, and because of, trade secrets and stuff. They might even have.
And again, to do it right, deploy another fiber run out there, it's going to be really expensive. Lots of horizontal.
Just based on the sewer process.
Although, can't they just go right on top of the sewer?
Paul Bunyan said they don't like to do
They don't
that,
do that.
and prefer not to.
Be 10% of the cost. I mean, you could stick a fiber plow on that.
I think they're afraid that, the people working on the sewer
Mhm.
gonna cut their fiber along the line. And they said they have a lot of issues with that in other places.
And the sewer project's been far, far from fancy. It's been horrible.
Oh, I believe
I
it.
mean, there's
Lots of dynamite going off up there.
yeah.
They said that the rock up there is the hardest thing you've ever come across.
Well, except for Rock County. When we were down in Rock County once with the governor's broadband task force, they showed us these drills that had been turned into mushrooms. Is a drill, and then the end of it was just squashed. And they call this Rock County for a reason.
Yeah. Well, that's 2 quartzite, which is pretty hard, granite essentially.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
gneiss up here, right? Isn't it?
Forget exactly what, but I do remember hearing that a lot of it is the oldest rock on the planet.
Yeah.
There's a reason it's still around.
2.7 billion years.
Yeah. So,
Oldest exposed rock.
Exposed.
yeah, yeah.
So I wonder how many other proposals Paul Bunyan has into.
I don't know the answer to that one.
Well, they told us about some of them in St. Louis County, besides Koochiching, because we're getting letters of support from our state legislator representatives that include those areas. So to talk them into writing letters of support, like, here's the rest of what we're doing in your voting district.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, we're just going to do the best we can. We point out we're competing against other Paul Bunyan projects and non-Paul Bunyan projects.
Yes.
But we'll
As
do
much
what we
as
can.
the state office might like to give them all to Paul Bunyan,
Yeah.
there's a lot of constraints on them doing that.
Is there a need for another kind of community meeting to generate projects?
There may be for the second round.
Maybe. We want to
Agenda items.
have a couple meetings. In fact, we have a meeting scheduled for today at 3 for KTI. But we want to explore and get rough, napkin type budgets for some of the stuff we want to pursue, like the Eliite thing.
Yeah.
Because we don't want to hold a big meeting. If we're going to
Right.
throw a lot of money for ideas that we already think are very worth pursuing and have some community backing, then we don't want to have a big meeting saying, "Hey, we've got $2,000 more to spend."
Good point. Okay.
But we definitely plan to.
That's the other thing is we did change recently is the frequency at which we meet. That way, we get more participation from people. Because oftentimes, even though everybody's really active in it, the meetings aren't very well attended, and a lot of that's because we're always just trying to figure out when the next time we're going to meet. So now we're meeting regularly on Wednesdays to get this project moving forward, all these projects moving forward quite a bit, and to capture some of that momentum that we've seen since the fall grants and stuff.
Well, we talked about the conference and how generative it was. Hard for you guys to imagine to have a better experience at this year's conference than you did at last year's, but wanted to make sure you knew about it.
They can actually go to the conferences.
That's right, last year you were in
Locked
a
in
room.
that room, but
It's the
Right.
Oh, yeah.
8th to the 10th.
Definitely worth it though. Even a couple of those guys still email us that we're in the planning shred to say, "Hey, how's it going?" or "I'm coming up."
Are you doing this right again?
October 8th.
no, we're not.
Why not?
I think
Too successful?
I think last year we had communities that were really well positioned to do it.
Oh, okay.
And so that was, and so the sewer counties, they've got applications now going in for the broadband grant as a result of the shred. The other county, Wasiki County, they were not ready. They didn't have a very good team, and it's kind of a struggle to find that. We had thought about 3 to find the third one, and we found out that if they weren't ready, they got a good broadband overview, but not nearly as action oriented.
Well, we appreciate it very much.
Yeah, and so it was, and then that was a big ask of the consultants when because I said, okay, just show up, don't do a lot of work in advance, and then, well, here's our maps, and they got all this stuff, they've done all this work, because which was great, but then it was a big ask of their time,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and like, you know, for CNS for you guys,
Yep.
I mean, it's worked out your partnership with Paul Bunyan. Paul Bunyan's a part owner of CNS,
Mm-hmm.
but, you know, there's not like they've got a bunch of money out of the deal, you know, I think. Although, and Finley did work with LeSueur, so they got some return on that.
Well, I think our thought was, let's just try this, and maybe those consultants would wanna offer that as kind of a something
Service.
that they did.
Quick start kind of thing.
Yeah,
It was really fun to watch, I mean, and to see the different approaches the different consultants took. And, you know, I think you guys did a great job, you know, you were really prepared and had a good team and made great progress.
I never, dreamed that it could end, that you could have this productive of an outcome.
Right. Oh, right, perfect.
Well, I still am trying not to count our chickens before they're hatched. 'Cause,
Yeah.
I mean, we're moving along nicely, but
Yeah, so that, I mean, it's, that was a great jump start for you guys, LeSueur, and you guys, it'd just be hard to find, you know, it just seemed like the timing was so right last time.
This is our 15th anniversary, if you believe it, conference.
the border.
So we're doing some leadership recognition, some special awards and
Okay.
to recognize some courageous leadership across. So like this afternoon, I got invited over to Roseau. Roseau Electric is signing today an agreement, or I guess they're celebrating the signing of an agreement with Wickstrom to do a CAF2 funded fiber to the home project in their service area, their unit ownership. So that's a really cool, courageous act. Really excited to see that. And so there's some other, just, over the last 15 years where people have made decisions that have resulted in a good number for people.
CAF2 auction, I'd like to clarify the difference between CAF2
Oh, there's a
and
CAF2 auction.
See, I don't know if we touched on this either, but the 50 PCs for people thing, that's all scheduled, and they have a plan for distribution for that.
Yep.
And
Dates picked out and materials,
taking
posters.
the lead on a lot of that. I think they have a date to it.
Yep.
I looked at the email yesterday.
I put it on our KTI calendar.
Could you forward that to me?
Yeah.
So just one thing to keep in mind about PCs for people, we say this where we go ever, if there's a unmet demand, so if after the distribution of those 50 of it met the need, there's an opportunity that would be a way to spend additional money.
Okay.
Get additional.
Small Town Tech is looking at business manager, is looking into doing a similar PCs for people type of thing. That's more locally based, so we can get old computers in the schools and stuff like that. And we did get it set up with Microsoft so that we can do that now. So now we just have to get the program together and start soliciting for computers. Because they gave us their old computers so we could supply the St. Thomas School with it. And then we ended up with extra computers, so we've been giving them to people for economic development and stuff like that. Because they didn't cost us anything. And we can't take them. It'd be
How old
illegal.
were the computers from the school?
They were 4th gen or 5th gen i7s, so because they were from their CAD labs.
Okay.
And the rest of theirs got sent back before we could really get our hooks in and try to get all the laptops and everything. But they're only buying the stuff that is i5 and higher and a lot of it, except for the Chromebooks. But so they're getting good computers for their money that we did a referendum for that was successful. And we still have a little cash left over from that for some more technology upgrades, including at the school, the Wi-Fi is getting all new ruckus access points and things like that to support it. They actually, because of us, me, I guess in this case, advocating for it from the school board perspective, is they had a NESC fiber band, and they still do. They have 3 years left on a 10-year contract with them, but it was the 8 years ago fiber speeds, not the fiber speeds of today. So they now have an agreement with Paul Bunyan for good fiber speeds. Because I had heard that they were splitting between all these 1,000 devices, 100 megabits. And so I was like, well, we can't do that. And it was very easy to push once we realized that there was a problem in the first place. 100 is fine for just about any business, but not a school that has all these devices.
Yeah, they want 10 megs per student, I think is the standard, isn't it?
Wow.
So they ended up getting, I think they got a 500 meg connection total. So it's still not the gigabit speed, but I think just that alone will be good enough for people to use it. And the school isn't going one-to-one across all grades. It's 7th grade and higher, I think, is one-to-one. And then there's computer carts and everything, a lot more than there was before for the younger grades.
I'm surprised that is NESC not responsive to provide more
That was
bandwidth.
my question as well.
I don't know. I don't know about that part. That's the IT director is handling that. I only advocate and try not to dig in too deep because I'm the board chair and it might not always be.
Yeah. Well, having some redundancy is not a bad thing either, so.
Yeah.
Did I understand, Ted, sorry, that the wireless upgrade was paid for through a public referendum? Is that what you said?
Yeah, and that and a bunch of other things.
Yeah.
It was a small part
School
of the
referendum.
overall
Yeah.
referendum, yeah. And so there's because we were operating at a deficit and spending into our general fund, so we were at our 7th year on a 10-year referendum. So I suggested that if we're able to, let's go out and because either we have to get more students, which we're working on, because we do have quite a few that leave our school for other reasons, and then the only way was to cut or increase funding, right? So we were going to cut staff and expenses or increase funding. So we thought we'd try to increase the funding before we started cutting people, and the area supported it by 2/3.
Nice.
And we got some upgrades to our hockey arena, which they supported a little less, but it was still around 2/3. And because we needed a whole new refrigeration system and that to even be able to continue, the pipes were so deteriorated and everything. So there were two separate parts, one bond, one referendum.
They're going to say you can't have the ice hockey unless you get the computers first. You know, it's one of those.
Well, and you
if this, then that,
You
right?
challenged my stereotypes about iFalls when you said that they supported the ice arena a little less than the school. See, I would have brought my.
Yeah, well,
stereotype
this town's
with it.
changed a little bit in that, and so I had a member of the community say we went for 2.5 million or 1 point something million for the arena. And he said, why didn't we go for 5 and just get the best arena possible? And I said, well, because we wanted it to pass. It's not the same thing. We got to put. It's not the same school it was in the 50s and 60s, and we're not winning state titles every year like we were, or have a population even supported anymore. So my thing was, well, we'll get it up and running, but we're going to put education first. So we asked for a lot more for the education part of it than we did for the arena. But we got enough to get by. We got the refrigeration replaced, a bunch of extra stuff, and now they're putting they're sectioning off part of the arena to make it a workout center for the hockey teams and stuff like that too. So.
Has the college ever asked about the computers for students there? Because I'm on the foundation board there, and they just came to the foundation board and asked for iPads for so many students. We have so many kids from, half the baseball team I think is from Puerto Rico and or Florida, and they're international students and they come basically with nothing.
Mm-hmm.
They were asking for funds to buy, I don't know how many it was, like 10 new iPads or something for kids that live in the dorm.
We've done a nice job, I think, of going around the projects. You said, I mentioned the Birchdale thing, and you said you didn't know much about it. Can you just take a minute?
Can I, before we move on, I just wanted to, you're aware of PCs for People and Tasca, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, okay. Just wanted to make sure, just wanted to ask.
Yeah,
Make
we for sure.
About
We're not.
5 or
Our actual thing isn't necessarily that when we're looking at our refurbing program, we're also looking at economic development and people starting businesses and stuff
Yeah,
like that.
great.
About 8 years ago, I went down to Grand Rapids to get trained to be their PCs for People person up here.
Oh yeah?
And then they remodeled and reoriented the whole PCs for People organization, and now they do all the remodeling in the Twin Cities.
Yeah,
So,
it looks like they're just like a distribution.
so yeah, we're pretty thoroughly up to speed on how that operation works. And what we want to do at our shop, independent of KTI, is basically replicate the PCs for People model, but with local computers, refurbished locally and back out to local users.
That's cool.
So none of us made it to the meetings you guys were having, those 4 meetings, getting together and sharing BBC ideas and what's working and all that, which is the kind of thing I love, so it killed me that I couldn't make it. Did those get recorded? I'm looking at
Yeah,
you.
you did. I was out of the country, but you did record them, and we've got it on.
Well, that was the Intelligent Community Forum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that wasn't really
That-
BBC
yeah.
sharing thing.
Okay.
That was the,
Okay.
The foundation hosted a group of people to go out to the New York City Intelligent Community Conference.
Uh-huh.
And,
Okay.
so some from the Iron Range and then some from cities we've worked with on that in the past.
So these meetings were people coming back from that conference, talking with local communities here in Minnesota?
So it's really me talking.
Okay.
And so we had meetings in 4 locations, Brainerd, Bemidji,
Right.
Red Wing, and Appleton, about this intelligent community approach.
Right.
And encouraging communities to use the benchmarking tool that
Okay.
intelligent communities, the competition uses.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd encourage you guys to do this, although it's due September 23rd. They say it takes about 8 hours to complete. I suspect that you can get a group of folks together in relatively short order and do it something less than that.
Okay.
But it is a nice tool that if you complete it, number one, it starts a discussion here about the things you are doing or could be doing to up your ante in the global competition for technology-based economic development. But then you also get a report back from intelligent community that shows how you compare against the 400 other communities that have applied. You kind of say, oh, we're doing pretty good over here, not so good over here. What do we need to do to be more comprehensive, covering all the 6 elements, or, how can we market what we're doing so well in advocacy, marketing, or projects like that. So I think it's a good, measuring tool. If you do it this year, you get your report, do it next year, see if you can move your scores up. And, some people really react well to that. You don't want to be below average, right? And so how can you step up that technology? And so the offer from the foundation is I'm available to come help facilitate a community meeting where we'll actually go through the application, and we won't necessarily write the application, but at least for each of those 6 intelligent community elements, there's a number of checkbox and kind of fill in the blank answers. Mm-hmm. And then, but for each one, then there's kind of an essay question. What's our best project in this area?
Okay.
So, we could at least identify the elements of what that story is, and somebody could go off and write that little essay, it's a page or 2 of about what's going on. For example, with your broadband stuff, that you formed your group, you did the charrette, you've done the surveys, you're partnering, you'd at least, talk about the origins as your project. And then next year you could say, we've got fiber to the home in 1,000 different locations out in the rural countryside now.
Okay. So you said application, what do you get? This is application for some funding or something?
So you're applying to win the Intelligent Community of the Year award.
Got it, yeah.
And then the benefit is to do the application, to self-assess, and then to get the report. And then there's 3 levels.
Which is basically their assessment of what you've told them to say, okay, here's...
And how you compare to the others. There are numeric scores.
Right.
There's no...
So you get that feedback automatically,
Yes.
and we might get selected as the...
Yeah, so they go to the top
intelligent
21 communities, and then the top 7, and the top community of the year. It's
Okay.
kind of a funnel that you go through. And if you make the top 21, then you have to do more work to provide more detail.
Okay.
So I'm part of the analyst group that helps determine who goes from the 21 to the 7.
Okay.
And then also, I'm a juror for going from top 7 to intelligent community.
Okay. I'm very skeptical of the number 8. 8 hours of work to pull this off.
Well, I mean,
I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying, okay, this
Well, you
sounds
think
like
it's
30
gonna
hours
take
to me.
more?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Good.
I think that if you had you know, if you had your team,
If the right people are there with the
right,
information
you can sit
already
down
in their
and
heads.
come up with the information. And some of it, you know, if you don't, there's a MPCA, you know, they're looking for some air quality data under the sustainability category. And I got that from MPCA. I said, you can give it to me and I'll hand it out, or 20 different people will call you for it. So they actually gave me a spreadsheet that provides that. And then, you know, have you had a hackathon? Do you do this? Do you recycle computers? Do you, so it's checkboxes
Checklist
that you
based.
go right through. You know, so it's writing those essays, 6 of them. So if you could assign those out, you know, to different people, then it's not so hard.
Okay.
Since it's organizational, it might be a good thing for Alyssa to keep us all on track of.
Potentially, yeah. She's good
She's our
start.
organizer.
But again, the benefit is you get the compared to what, the contextual data, how you're doing compared to other places, and it is a conversation starter.
Yeah.
That here could help fuel interest in your work.
Yeah,
I was
you
thinking
educate your leadership of,
When we're talking to the
Here's
town
how-
and the cities and all that, say, hey,
yeah. But if you
Here's where
would
we're at.
invite your superintendent or high school principal or the provost from the college, and you start to go through those knowledge workforce things, and you're saying, well, do we have this? No. Do we have this? No. Do we have this? No. People can start to say, oh, we've got to get going. Because this is what the communities that are really working it, they're doing those
It's
things.
an annual event, Bill?
It is,
how long has it been going on?
about 20 years.
It certainly seems worth doing. You think we can,
2020.
was that,
It might be a great target for us for 2020
to do it in 2020? Do you think we can do it
versus 3 weeks from now.
within 3 weeks?
Everything else we've got on our plate. Because theoretically, sitting in this chair a year from now, we'll have answers on whether we have fiber to the home in these rural areas and hit this 35-40% tile.
I would encourage you to look at the application
Okay.
and just over coffee, 3 or 4 to go through and just do it. And you could do that in
Well, I think
half an
The
hour.
benefit it would have is more for clout, like if we do it now and have
Yes.
such crappy results and then such a great improvement, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Because we know
It's
we're gonna
the-
have
the
a great
baseline.
improvement no matter
Yeah.
what.
Right.
Okay.
Even if we don't get fiber to the home, we'll have great improvement.
As part of this process for the deadline in 3 weeks, are you able to come up? Do you need to come up for that to happen, and are you able to?
I'm not necessary.
Okay.
I think I would add some value, but it's not a necessary thing.
All right.
And so it is getting very interesting though, because I'm gone Labor Day week. But fully available after that. But it's
Okay.
people who sweat deadlines. But I do think that even if we say, okay, let's spend, if you could get people to say, we want 3 hours for people, then we could go in an hour or so and do the checkbox kind of things. And then people could sit and say, okay, Alyssa, you write that workforce thing. What's your best workforce project?
Right.
And so you could write 3 paragraphs, or you could write 3 pages. That's really up to you.
Okay.
And so, whenever you're self-satisfied with, oh, this reflects kind of what we're doing. The Taiwanese, when you say, well, what's your best workforce project? They say, oh, Global Workforce Initiative, they would say the name of the project is, with 300 elements underneath it. So they're pretty obsessive on how they do it. But, so what's a project, or, so how you decide to write it is really up to you. But I think if you were to say, get the right people in the room together and say, what is your best workforce project initiative here in this area? Would it be a question of people staring at each other and saying, what's a workforce initiative? Or would they say, well, it's this, no, it's this, no, it's this, no, it's that.
Right.
And so, or they'd say, well, what about that thing we're doing through the collaboration of the community colleges in Northeast Minnesota? That would be something you could claim, with whatever local things you're doing, then under that. So
Okay.
I think it's a great discovery thing.
Sounds like it's worth pursuing.
So we could,
For this round.
if you're interested, we could set a date, or you and I could do that later.
Sure.
Yep, and you do those Wednesday meetings?
Yep, that's where we're starting. It started last Wednesday.
Is that every Wednesday?
Well, for a while. The how
So
many
far,
Mondays?
2 weeks in
Yeah.
a row.
There we go, well,
Gotta start somewhere.
We do plan on not being every week after some of the
Yeah.
Paul Bunyan stuff settled.
Yeah,
Sure.
We'll keep it Wednesdays at 3. Which Wednesdays at 3 will depend on how much we have that is needs urgent attention, etc. But that's the plan for now.
and so, let's see what that says, confirm something or other. So, Wednesday the 11th, I've got some other things, but I could do it, or the 18th, but it's due the 23rd, so the
Right.
11th would be a good day.
Works for me. Is the 11th at 3? Want to make that the plan? All right. I'll add it to the KTI calendar. What should we call it? The
ICF,
ICF meeting?
benchmarking, or?
Okay.
Thanks. Well,
All right.
that's
Thanks.
exciting.
Glad you can come up.
So Bill led Dakota Futures weren't you guys in the top 21 for?
Yeah, Dakota, Economic Development Group in Dakota County, and we made the top 21 3 years in a row.
Nice.
We could never make the top 7 because Dakota County's big enough you could kind of grab, cherry pick stories. And so, and we had great, big Thomson Reuters and Goodrich Aerospace and things like that we could do cool things with, but I kept trying to turn it into more of a strategic approach. The Marshall, 13 cities, 6 chambers, and 2 colleges, and we could never quite do that. And so that's why we never really moved farther.
For the meeting we just scheduled, how long? 2-3 hours?
And I think 3 hours would be good.
Okay. So 3 to 6. Do we need it to start at 2, you think, to be done by 5, or is 3 to 6 fine? Let's schedule it as 2 to 5. And we'll bring it up at today's meeting and confirm interest and availability and all that. And that will be at the airport conference room, unless you hear otherwise.
You're doing that on the 11th?
Yeah, I know, I just looked at my calendar.
What are you thinking?
No, the next day I have to be in Winthrop, in southern Minnesota. That's right.
All right. Well, thank
Well,
you
is
for
there
that
anything,
input.
you guys, it's been so great to check in, to hear from you, to kind of take this tour of what's going on. Is there any other things that you want to share with us that we should hear while we're here? Or any other questions you've got?
I did just text Soren about the status of that Birchdale co-working space, because it might already be built and everything, but the last time I talked to him, we were talking about I ran into him at the Bass tournament, and we were talking about the PBS. Steve Howard contacted us about a PBS interview that's going to be coming out for, I can't remember the name of the show, and they're interested in interviewing some local people who are affected by their businesses.
Affected by the lack of high-speed internet.
By the lack of high-speed internet, and so we're picking out a couple people for them to interview. That's the topic of conversation for today's KTI meeting when we're together. So that's just kind of a little extra cool thing that's happening.
If you didn't say it's the PBS Almanac show
Yeah, almanac.
specifically.
So.
Oh, here, the Minnesota Almanac show.
Yeah.
That's my understanding.
So they'll be doing a little feature on that, which will be kind of cool.
Yeah.
We got a couple business owners picked out, and
Well, I do have to say, you guys have a lot of unique aspects to your work here, and the Birchdale Co-working Center is an example of that, and
Yeah.
it's, it has kind of a special spot
Oh yeah.
in our imaginations, because it's just so innovative and creative, and
I think we told you guys before, they initially proposed like a really simple Bedard's storage shed as their co-working space, and a lot of their funding was coming from the CON funding source, and those guys basically went back to them and said, why don't you guys do this a little bit better? Why don't you spend a little bit more of our money? Let's do this right if we're going to do it. So I haven't heard what that ended up expanding into, but...
I think this might be somewhat from a blend initiative, but not ours. The CenturyLink also had expanded to closer to this way up until Franz Jedney State Park. So CenturyLink added high-speed fiber internet to more Koochiching County coming around too.
And that's what Birchdale's tapping into.
Yeah,
Right. The co-working center and the community center, not the rest of the community. It's one of those a la carte things rather than a community-wide service, but still.
Yeah, and Soren was telling me about a different, I don't know if it was related to a blind one, but he had a more rural blending initiative that he was a part of out there, I think. Can't remember about that one, but I think it had something to do with Century Link coming over a little more. Or maybe it was like years ago he was talking about that economic, I guess. But he keeps on advocating for them to keep on expanding, and he was a big part in getting them to the Franz Jevon part too. So even though we're not doing anything, we funded that co-working space, but like as far as advocating for broadband, the population was too not dense, low density over there for Paul Bunyan kind of interested. We did the same thing for we had quite a people ask us about the outskirts of Little Fork in that area, and Paul Bunyan said no, it's just population density right now.
However, with the co-working space, at least there's publicly available high speed if you really need it.
And for rural healthcare, to save places for people to be, outside of homes and stuff like that too. That was a big push on why we thought that was so necessary, and why we looked at other places and advocated for a similar place in the Capitola for similar reasons. But they weren't as receptive because they kind of have their community center there, and that's open, and they have the Wi-Fi extended out already. But Jim was there talking to the people that were involved to try to get a little co-working space there. I guess they had already kind of had that model at the top of the Gateway General Store on the second floor too. Cool. Somewhat.
Not a co-working space.
It's so seasonal down there?
That's certainly a big part of it. But also the number of people they have coming as tourists is part of the reason it makes sense, even if it's only in the summer season, to have a co-working space where people can get a little work done and then stay a little longer, or at least be happier.
We planted some seeds there at the very least. So.
Yeah. The Gateway General connection, it wasn't ever a co-working space, but there was a woman who worked for United Healthcare who worked in an office. She just talked with the owners of the Gateway General grocery store, gas station place, and they let her use a room, and she worked for United Healthcare out of that room because she couldn't have the internet connection she needed. Barely had it there, but couldn't have it all at home. So it's similar to the co-working model, but it was one person arranging with one space with one business. It definitely is an example of the kind of need and potential that's out there for it. So,
Well, it's really fun to be here, and good to check in with you guys.
Well, it's nice to have you here checking in on us.
I said with you, not on you.
yeah.